Oh, sorry. I've just blown in because of the wind that's currently going around my house at this moment in time. Good evening, everyone. How are we?
Yes, thank you. You?
Caught you off guard there. Good evening to The Caring View, the only online social care chat show airs each week on YouTube. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, find that bell. If you're unsure how to do that, go to our Facebook group. We have a little video there that will show you how to do it. It's also on our Twitter feed. And don't forget that the views we express in tonight's show are of our own and not the companies we represent. Housekeeping done. How are we both?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you very much. You?
I'm good. I've just rewatched the Panorama from last night, and I was thinking to myself, first time I watched it, oh, more bad press for care. How are we gonna cope? Actually, I don't think it was that bad. Yes, there's the damning aspects of it and the awful care that some people have been receiving, but I think it only strengthened the view that actually it's this investment lark that's ruining some of the sector and not actually individual providers, which make up about 80% of the sector anyway. So I don't think it was damaging to all the little providers out there, but it's definitely raised some questions that do need answering now and need some response from government. What do you both think?
Do you want to go first?
I actually disagree, Adam. I thought it was bad for the sector. Again, I think that it's this social care bashing that goes on. And I understand in respect of these big corporations and how they spend their money and things. And I completely get that. But at the same time, I had seen on all of our Twitters and I had received messages about where I worked, who I worked for. And it's that association with the bigger companies that I think people need to remind. I saw Mark had tweeted, hang on a minute, remember that a certain, quite a large percentage of the sector is associated with smaller providers, and people had to be reminded of that. And I did see some negativity on social media from families and friends last night of those that are living in services in respect of then worrying where their money was going. And I think that, to be quite honest, you hear this all the time. Oh, bad publicity is always good publicity and things like that. But I kind of get a little bit sick of it. I kind of get a little bit sick of the tirade that kind of comes across. And I feel like then we are associated with that negativity. The smaller providers are then associated with that negativity, and people like Mark and like you and everybody else who was tweeting last night have to then kind of prepare for that backlash to the extent where it's, hang on a minute, it's not everybody, don't associate that with everybody. So in one respect it was interesting when she laid that massive timeline across the table, but in another respect I did think that really can we just back off a little bit and give social care some space? So in one respect I agree, but in another respect I disagree, because I do think it kind of called everybody in a bad light, in a negative light, because everybody associates social care with the big providers at times.
Yeah.
I think for me, I think it was good for care workers, because I think a lot of people were saying these providers are making all this money, making all this profit, but actually you're not paying care workers enough. And I think obviously it helped being on after the kind of the Ed Balls documentary, because people had seen that side of things. I do agree. I think people then tarnish every care home with that, because even then when you're challenging people, they're like, well, it's not blah, blah, blah. And obviously they can give examples of small care homes where the profit has been made. And obviously, ultimately, at the end of the day, every care home, private or local authority funded, is there for a profit, because it's a business at the end of the day. It did lead to a lot of questions on social media for people that were looking at getting into the sector or had people that lived in care homes that were then asking questions. So I think it did good for people being able to explore more. I think it did raise a lot of comments, definitely on Twitter, about people that might be paying privately for loved ones to be in a care home, and other people in the same care home being local authority funded, and what extra do they get? And I think they obviously know that they use people that are privately funded to top up the payment to say, to stay in profit and, to keep going. But I think it then poses the question of that it's probably not right thing to do, is it, if they don't receive anything extra? But yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I do think everybody will be tarnished with the same brush, unfortunately. But I do think it was a good conversation piece, and a lot of kind of people calling out Jeremy Hunt, because obviously he was once in charge of social care cuts, and obviously was then fronting a Panorama show about it. But yeah.
Yeah, it was a weird one. It was a weird one because on one hand we've got this eye-watering debt that some of them were in, £1 billion worth of debt, and then you've got people openly talking about no, but it's great because they're looking for a bigger return on their investments, and some we were able to do this on care businesses pre meltdown of the economy, and it was really, really good. And I think there needs to be a conversation happening to stop talking about people in care as assets, because that's what they are at this moment in time, is assets to a lot of people. And whether it's a regulation on profit, whether it's a regulation on the dividend, with, I can't remember whether it was HG1 or somebody else asking for support from the local authorities on safeguarding their fees and their income, and then took out a 4.8 million dividends. There has to be some sort of regulation on it. And I do think that goes for all providers. We understand they have to make a profit. They have to reinvest. Businesses need to remain viable. And even Mike Padgen said on the Ed Balls one, he wants to earn enough to live comfortably, which, I think is fine and respectable. But at the end of the day, we need to remember that the money has to go to care and the people providing it. They're the ones that should be coming out with the best aspects of it, isn't it? The only thing that I found a little upsetting for me was the care assistant from Ireland, who obviously lost the job because the home had sold off these beds to investors and everything like that. She introduced herself as a senior care assistant, which I thought was fantastic. But they put the little tagline under her name as just care assistant. And I thought to myself, when we're talking about career pathways and career opportunities in social care, and we want people to be able to see the wealth of the roles that are out there, if she says she's a senior care assistant, bill her as such, because then people can see where the progression can go in the role. So I thought that was a little bit naff. But overall, maybe I'm in the minority. Maybe it's because I've got a different view to it, because I've just spent a blooming month writing a social care people plan and knowing that these big companies make up the huge proportion of it. But maybe that's where the work needs to go now, is educating the public and bringing that public perception up to scratch to go, actually, your Four Seasons, your HC1, your Barchesters, the 10 big companies only make up 20% of the sector. So, please don't judge us all on that. But then we need to make a move to engage all the little providers to have more of a unified voice, maybe. It's hard because we're so fragmented, isn't it?
Yeah, it does come back to that whole one voice for the whole sector issue. But yeah, I think the other problem is, obviously, if you're a large organisation, you've got more staff and more time to then sit on, discussion panels and visit places, well, obviously pre-pandemic visit places and attend meetings. Whereas the small providers, obviously, it's normally, a team of small management staff, directors quite often are hands-on as well, and they don't have the time to be able to attend board meetings and chair things and, work in party groups and bits and pieces, which is a shame. But
it just came across to me that social care, it impacted to me that social care was about money. And for those that work in social care, that is never the case. And when they're talking to a family, and I understand the remit in why they were talking to that gentleman's daughter and making that explanation, but that wasn't the carers, that wasn't the senior carers, that wasn't probably even the manager of the home. This is the board members and the sharing out of this debt and how this builds up. So I felt it impacted massively on those that are working in the homes, because they didn't share the full picture. They rolled out this and said to the daughter, here you go. This is where your money went, and this proportion went towards your dad's care. Well, that proportion paid for them carers and paid for that senior carer and paid for that manager. And it felt as though it was very much money, 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 money. And to those people who are taking care of that individual, that isn't the case.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt a little bit stunted in respect of that, because it was about, to me, it was about let's expose this, let's expose about the money. But this is somebody's mum, dad, nanny, granddad. This isn't. This is an individual. This is a human being we're talking about. This isn't about the board of directors and things like that. This could have been done. I felt it could have been done in a much better way. If they were going to describe in respect to the finances, let's not bring people's families into this. They may have asked for that, or they may have contributed, but let's have a respect for the people that are living in social care.
Yeah, it could have just been about the business itself, couldn't it?
Yeah,
and they didn't need to focus on social care either. It could have just been, these are companies that are, making a profit, and it could be anywhere, couldn't it be? Could have been the NHS with the, with their contracts and bits and pieces, and obviously HCAs are obviously on a low pay, like care workers. Could be, it could have been anywhere that makes a lot of money but actually pays their staff, just above national minimum wage. And I think that's the sad thing, isn't it? That they're making all this money, but actually the frontline staff working day in, day out, for a lot of those companies, it is the minimum wage or just above it, like 10p over, which is sad.
I mean, yeah. And if only there was a way to celebrate and recognise all these people doing amazing work. Oh wait, I'm getting nice and fat and plump from our advent calendars each morning at the minute. And I think the stories and the videos have been absolutely fantastic, and we're still ongoing with them. And like I say, even if we have more videos than we need, please still keep nominating people, because these tales of joy and happiness are just. I mean, I edit them and they're a pleasure to watch constantly. I do publish me if I'm having an half day, which is seldom nowadays. But if I'm having an half day, I'll put in, do these videos, and it just brings us absolute joy to me. So. Keep nominating for the Advent calendar. But enough doom and gloom in Advent calendars and Christmas. Who have we got tonight, Dawn? I'm really excited for tonight.
So we've got returning, I have to say, Sandra Robinson, Caroline Hill, and we also have Gary Brailsford.
Good evening.
Hello. Thank you for having us back. Appreciate it.
I'm really excited about this because Gary, from what I understand, is a master chef. And he's sitting in his own kitchen and he's created delights ready for us to discuss.
Certainly has.
This is where we need smell-o-vision.
Yeah. Or just the food right in front of you.
Yeah.
I know. I feel like I'm going to leave tonight being really hungry.
I mean, see, that's the good thing about Gary's food, because so many people with dysphagia on texture-modified diets, they're hungry. But if you do it right and you get the nutrition in, not hungry.
And that's the point of tonight's show, isn't it? It's about, and I think Gary's Twitter name says it itself. It's about dignified dining. The whole reason you're here tonight is to talk about, adaptive diets and people who can't eat the regular foods that we all enjoy eating, and that there are ways around it. So for people who are watching who may not have caught your first episode, do you want to just give us a bit of an introduction into what dysphagia is and how it does affect people swallowing and food intake?
Yeah, so dysphagia is a swallowing disorder, and the latest stats that we have says that about 50 to 75% of care home residents will at some point have dysphagia. So that also tells you that in the elderly and the frail, it's a significant condition. And you only get it if you've got something else that causes it. And it could be that you've got multiple comorbidities or dementia or stroke, that sort of thing. And we know that the things that people really look forward to a great deal of the time, especially at Christmas, is food and drink. And there's no good reason why, if you've got dysphagia, you shouldn't be able to still enjoy your food and drink. And it's not just what you can have, but how you have it as well. So the things that Gary can recommend about how you can make up texture modified meals is great, but it's also those carers and those nurses in the care homes who make all the difference in supporting people in how to take it, as well as understanding for example, from Caroline as a dietitian, how you can fortify that food, because so often that gets forgotten, especially in the purees. So yeah, looking forward to showing people what can be done tonight.
Well, before we get started, I just need to give you all a massive thank you. So, the last time you were on this show, I was a care manager and an elderly residential home, and we were going through an outbreak towards the end of my working at that company, and I had a lot of people who had developed swallowing difficulties and were pouching food during that period because they were eating in isolation. And there's only so much with a mask on when you can go swallow, and they can't see it. They can't see that natural aspect of other people eating, which benefits them. So I took loads of tips from that last show. So we were having afternoon teas with biscuits soaked in cups of teas on plates, so they still look like digestives, and sandwiches that had been soaked in stock, and they were really tasty, and they were going down well, and it got me through that outbreak, and everyone went through with great diet and great intake. Good. And I took it all from you guys, so just a massive thank you. I needed to say that before we get started.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you very much.
That's so nice to hear, because I think that's what motivates us, doesn't it? It's why we want to get that message out there, because even if you just take away a couple of tips, it can be transforming for these individuals who, you know, are really suffering to a certain extent.
Yeah. So, where do we want to start?
I think perhaps it makes sense to go through the different levels, because we're concentrating on the texture modified diet, aren't we? I'm going to share a secret with you that we only usually tell people who come on our training. I'm going to share it with the whole wide world because we're on YouTube. You don't have to read absolutely everything on the IDSI.org website. You don't even have to go through all of the details on the lengthy leaflets and the it should look like this and do this, that, and the other. There's only one section you need to know. And if you go to IDSI.org and you go to resources and you go to audit sheets, every single one of those audit sheets actually tells you everything you need to know about what the food should be like. It doesn't tell you how to help somebody eat and drink it. Speech therapist does that. But it tells you exactly what it should look like and how to test it. And that's all you need to know to get the food itself right. And we're going to start tonight with level 4 puree, which some people kind of think in their heads is like liquidized. It's not. That's level 3, and liquidized runs like a drink, like a thick drink. But we're going to start with level 4 puree. And what Gary will be able to show you with his brilliant food, and Caroline will be able to tell us about how we fortify it, is how that should look to be safe. But then we can also do everything we can to that so it's appealing and tasty, etc. But in summary, level 4, it should be completely smooth, no bits at all, not grainy, no teensy tiny little bits of anything, completely smooth. And if you picked it up with a fork, it would still sit on the fork. It might start to slightly drop through the prongs, but it won't run through. And if it sat on the plate and you put the prongs of the fork over it, it would make some little lines, and those lines would stay, they wouldn't disappear. And the other really important thing about the level 4 puree is that it's cohesive, so it kind of all holds together on that fork or spoon, and if you dropped it onto a plate, it would fall off in one, not in bits, not running. And then the bit everybody forgets, but it's there on those IDSI audit sheets. It mustn't be too adhesive, so too sticky. Because if you imagine trying to swallow something that's too gluey and sticky and dry, it makes it so much harder. And you're at increased risk of aspiration, which can cause chest infections and pneumonia, or possibly choking. So those, the 3 main things: smooth, cohesive, not too adhesive. That, in summary, is your level 4 puree. And the reason we recommend it for people is because they might not be able to chew anymore, because it might be painful to swallow, and because possibly that there's an esophageal problem, so it needs to be able to pass through the esophagus readily. Those are just some of the reasons why we might recommend it.
So not like my mum's mashed potato then, lumpy and gluey.
Oh, do you know, I mean, Gary will tell you, getting potato right, there's too many places think the potato, yeah, there you go, they think the potato's all good, but it would fail. If you did the IDSI level 4 audit sheet on it, it might be smooth enough, it might be cohesive enough, but it's usually too adhesive, and that's where it fails.
Yeah. So, Gary, have you got a level 4 diet ready for us so that we can have a look at what magic you can do?
I have, but I'm going to just hold you there for a few minutes. I want to talk through the rest of it. So, we cooked the meat tender. I did a turkey. Christmas is coming, so I did some turkey. And what I did, I cooked it in the pressure cooker. And what it did, it basically steamed it. So a lot of chefs may have a combination oven at work where they can steam and roast. Good thing to do so the meat's nice and tender. I've got some gravy here, and I want to show you the gravy. A lot of people make packet gravy, and I say this is a roux-based gravy. You can see the consistency. It's fairly thick. It's what the chefs call a coating consistency, and it tastes amazing. For me, I think the gravy is one of the most important parts of the meal. Certainly when we're adding it to the meat, you can't just puree the meat on its own. It needs to be a good sauce. So we're trying to get that turkey mousse consistency. That's what we need to get. All of the consistencies on the plate need to be exactly the same. So I'm going to use cream potato just for ease, and I want to show you the cream potato here. And these are the checks. So we're checking that the lines are there. There's no lumps in there, and I sometimes sort of just make a, you can see how smooth that is. There's no lumps in there. We're just going to get some of this on the fork. It sits on the fork, a little tail underneath, as Sandra said, and then we just need to tap it. Comes straight off. It's cohesive but not adhesive, so it's not sticky. So all the consistencies are the same. I want to show you the colors of the vegetables that I've used. So I've used parsnips, I've used carrots, and I've used Brussels sprouts fresh. This is all fresh vegetables that I recommend. Now you can see the colors there. What chefs normally do, they normally cut the vegetables all one way, get to the end of service or get to the start of service and try and blend them. This is not rocket science. You have to take some of the liquid out. So I want to show you that the carrots that I've got here, they're cooked al dente, and this is how we check. We're going to put the thumb on the back of the fork, and we're going to put the fork in, and you can see it just goes in. That's why the carrots are really colourful. Exactly this. The Brussels sprouts are probably cooked just a little bit more, and what we've done, we've pureed them. We've pureed the parsnips. I say don't be afraid to mix vegetables as well. So if the parsnips can be quite starchy, so you can put some swede with it, for instance, needs to be just cooked a little bit under, a little bit firmer than you would normally cook it. I've actually got some little sausages that I've got, and I've skinned them, and I cooked them without colour, so there's no crispiness on there, and I pureed them. I'm going to show you my plate of food. So this is my level 4 puree. Okay. So, note we've got a cloche on there. The cloche, you can hold this and it will not fall off. This protects the food, keeps it nice and moist, stops it going dry. So, we'll take that off. So here is.
So I presume if it goes dry, it's going to fail the IDSI test.
Yeah, and what happens then? People are more inclined to want to pour gravy over the top of it if it is going dry. So I say go back to basics and get the consistencies right. All of the consistencies are exactly the same on the plate. There's my plate of food. And you can see.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't it look amazing?
Amazing.
So we've got turkey with gravy. We've got a little sausage there with that we blended down. We've got the carrots. We've got Brussels sprouts, and we've got some parsnip. And used a piping bag. So we use just a plain nozzle piping bag for the vegetables, and a star nozzle piping bag just to get a bit of height on there. Normally what happens with pureed meals, they're very flat, watery, different consistencies. So I say try and give it a bit of height and give it that 3D effect so it can look really good. there's still a temptation for carers to look at this and say, we still need some gravy on this, chef. And I say, no, you don't need gravy. All the consistencies have been checked. The gravy is in with the turkey. That's what gets the amazing taste. This is perfect. Yes, if you want to look at the care plan, if they can have gravy and it might link into the fluids, fine. Or if there's an issue where it may be a little bit sticky for this individual and it's in the care plan that we can have gravy at a certain level, then we'll make the gravy. We'll put it in a sauce boat on the side, certainly not pouring it over and mixing it in. That's the level before.
That would increase the risk of aspiration if you did that. That's why we did it. Always in it, never on it for the things like gravy.
So Gary, can I just ask, what do you think of these moulds that are advertised all over care homes? So I'm working interimly at a care home at the moment, and one of the emails I received today was about a carrot mould, a sausage mould, a turkey mould, a chicken, you know, you name it. They had moulds for everything, even chips.
I personally don't like them just because it's not the cost to buy them. It's just how are you going to reheat them? Because you have to use a thickener. This food has got no thickener in whatsoever, so it will not affect the taste. If you thicken it and then put it in the freezer, then you pop them out, put them on the plate. You have to think how you're going to reheat this. And I personally, I want fresh food. It's reheated food, and I get this might be a need for it, you know, that there can be. But in my opinion, if you've got the skills, if you've got the equipment and the time, and you can prepare it fresh, I recommend to do it fresh every time. You're
going to get far better results, aren't you, in terms of how it looks as well as the safety aspect?
Definitely. And the portion sizes, you can vary it. You can do a small, medium, or large portion for individuals, where if it's a mould, it's just set. And yeah. So in my opinion,
I agree.
I'm not a lover of moulds.
No, I agree.
And I think looking... Go on.
The number of times the number of times I've seen people use the moulds, and they look brilliant when you first make it and it first goes into the fridge or the freezer, and then when it is reheated, not only will it fail because you get either crust around it or you get liquid runoff, it's become too adhesive, and there's something about what has happened to it through all of those different chemical processes of freezing and reheating that even if it did pass on serving, you'll notice on those IDSI audit sheets, you don't just test on serving, you test at 15 minutes and 30 minutes because food changes consistency over time, especially as it cools, and then it fails later.
And I think it's thinking about what happens to food that that's not been texture modified, just normal food, like porridge, for example. That's just a normal food that thickens over time. Pureed food and other texture modified food is no different. It will all start to alter as it gets exposed to the elements, even just in the kitchen or sat in the resident's room. So if it's been sat with the resident for a little bit longer because they may be a slow eater, it could potentially also change during that time period as well. So it's bearing that in mind. Actually, it might be a safety concern, and you might want to be actually removing that food from the resident if it's taken a long time to consume it, because it's then changing consistency as well.
And I think looking at that plate Gary had, the carrots were hard to tell whether they were a mould or not, if I'm honest.
Yeah. That's why I thought I'd ask.
I'm pleased you asked it.
Everywhere.
I had it in the back of my mind as well, because I remember we discussed moulds last time, and someone was telling me that I think Sandra had said that she didn't recommend them because of the reheating, and I was thinking, are those carrots moulded, or are they just...
No, we don't cheat. Barry doesn't cheat. No. And the thing is, it's relatively inexpensive, isn't it, Gary? Because
it's just piping skills, and it's just being confident. I can train anyone to do the piping. I trained even speech and language therapists to do it in Leicester. So they piped it and never piped before, and it looked amazing. So it can be done, just practicing, really. That's all it is. And if you puree it right and get the right consistency, even without the thickener, if the vegetables are cooked right, you can layer it to get that height, to make it look 3D and to make it look really appealing.
And Gary, loads of people say to us, don't they, we don't have time. We've got too many residents. We can't be making it fresh like that. What's your answer to that?
That's the biggest issue in kitchens, I would suggest, is time. So I always recommend to do some mise en place which is preparation prior to cooking. You have to do preparation. I talk about Christmas Day. You know, if I'm at home, I do all my preparation on Christmas Eve for Christmas Day, so I can get up and be on the Prosecco at 10:30 in the morning enjoying Christmas while cooking the lunch. So you have to do preparation, and even in a care home, even if there's just you and a catering assistant or a kitchen assistant, you need to do some preparation. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to fail. And some of this prep can be done.
So
Gary,
I have.
can you... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I have like one that might be two questions. So let's say you're a small home and you've only got one person who requires a modified diet and they're on a level 4. How easy is it just to prepare for one person? Because I always think in my head, because when I puree stuff at home, I'll puree something and I'll go, oh, there's not really much there. So you add more to it. To get like a decent portion, if you know what I mean. So I always think that when you puree foods, the amount that you put on a plate will multiply. Am I wrong in that? How does it work?
Well, you're nearly right. It's true that it might take a little bit more, but it's not 2 portions. It takes a little bit more when it's pureed, but if you cook it properly, I'd say that you can cook the vegetables fresh in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you can cook them al dente, take them off, puree them down, let them cool down, label and put them in the fridge. They're low risk, so that can go in the fridge. Your vegetables are the hardest thing to get right. Do the cream potato, pass it through a ricer, check that consistency, no lumps, lovely and smooth, fork test, make sure it's lovely and smooth, because people make cream potato and leave it cracking and it's too stiff. That's not good. Remember, everything needs to be chocolate mousse consistency on the plate. So that's key. That should set the standard. And then you do the meat last. So there are things that you can do. You're not getting to lunch and looking what you've cooked for everyone and then start to blend it. It won't work. You have to cook the food 2 ways, and you have to give it some time. You will give yourself at least half an hour to plate the food, and if there's only one person, you can do all your components, do your meat last, puree that down, get your vegetables out, you heat them in the microwave. They're low risk, make sure they're up to temperature over 70 degrees for 2 minutes, bring them out, put them in a piping bag. You can literally do 4 plates of food pureed and piped. I can do it in 2 minutes.
And you can use a microwave because it's still fresh. You've only made those veggies and put them in a fridge a few hours, and they will pass your IDSI audit before. So we say pass at the pass. It's got to pass at the pass before it goes out at serving. And if it doesn't pass at the pass, then it's your chef's skills to correct it, because it should be leaving the kitchen ready. Levels 4, 5, and 6 should leave the kitchen ready. You shouldn't be expecting, unless it says otherwise in the speech therapy recommendations, you shouldn't be expecting any carers to be doing anything else to it.
It's the chef's responsibility and their reputation. So I say I would finish it from the kitchen. With reference to the vegetables, because they're cooked well and they're not overcooked, you need sunglasses to eat the plates of food, because the colours of the vegetables, they're nutritious, they're colourful, they're a perfect consistency. You don't need to do anything with it. No thickener required. And Gary,
do you want to just touch on the nutrition aspect? Because obviously with level 4 puree, that's where you're probably going to get the greatest risk in terms of people not necessarily consuming adequate amounts, and they're not potentially at higher risk of malnutrition. So what are your thoughts around food fortification, particularly for the vegetables?
For the vegetables, I say you can cook the butter in with the carrots, for instance, but I wouldn't add any butter to the vegetables because it would water it down. I would just make sure that the cream potato had fortification. So if they needed fortification, I would put some cream, some butter in there. You could even put cheese in there. Just need to make sure it doesn't harden up though with the cheese. But yeah, definitely fortify what you can fortify with the puree. It's pretty straightforward. It is key, what Caroline said, that you need to make sure that portion sizes are important as well. If someone's got a good appetite, we need to make sure they get the right size portion. If they're very frail, won't eat much, don't give them too big a portion because it will be off-putting. They'll back off and eat nothing. So that can be detrimental. So you need to get it right. You need to know your residents.
And I think what you were saying about using gravy as well is really a great example of a way of kind of maybe thinning down a food consistency to get it to the right consistency, but doing it in a way that's not just using pure water where there's no additional extra calories in. And yes, gravy is not providing a huge amount, but it's a little bit extra, and that all adds up.
That's definitely true. I always say that you shouldn't be adding water because there's no nutrition. So yeah, gravy, even a sauce. It could be a mushroom sauce or a sauce, a nice cream sauce or something, a white wine sauce. So there's loads you can do. It's about making sure that the calorific value is in there, definitely.
And I suppose if you're making your gravy with a roux, so you've got like your good quality butter in there as well, there's a little bit added extra, isn't there? It's not just like Bisto gravy. So where do we go from level 4?
Funnily enough, level 5. And it's,
I didn't know whether it was an up or down scale.
No, and that's a good point, because we didn't mention levels 0 through to 4 are also numbers for drinks, and they get gradually thicker. So 3 and 4 cross over with food, and then you go from 4 to 7 for your food. Level 5 minced and moist diet kind of does what it says on the tin. It's meant to be thoroughly minced and thoroughly moist. And the mincing means it's got to be chopped up. So the pieces shouldn't be any bigger for adults than 4 millimeters. And Gary's giving you a good clue as to how you can work that out. 4 millimeters is usually the space between prongs of a regular dining fork, adult's fork. And it's one of the most challenging for people to get right, because again, it's making sure it doesn't get too dry and adhesive, and it should all fall away in one cohesive from a spoon or a fork. And when Gary picks that up with a fork, you'll see that it doesn't fall through the fork because it's cohesive enough. And when you do those IDSI audit checks and you look on those sheets, you'll see it has essential criteria, and you just have to meet those essential criteria, and the rest is up to your chef to make it look appealing, as Gary's meal will here. Because one of the problems as well with level 5 is it's a more, tell me if you think I'm wrong, Gary, but it's usually more of a challenge to try and make it look appealing on the plate, because it's hard to shape level 5 minced and moist.
Okay. So should I talk
Sorry, I was on mute. Just before we get on to that, and I think this is a really good opportunity to, and I know we're talking about dysphagia diets and things like that, but a really good opportunity to champion cooking in social care. Because we touched on at the beginning about career pathways and everything like that. We have had a comment come through saying, that there is a shortage of cooks in care, which, is true. And I don't think people realise the wonders that you can create in social care in kitchens. So Gary, for people who might be watching this who are chefs and thinking, I want to do something different, I want to give back, but I don't think I can do care, why is cooking in social care really rewarding?
Well, it is rewarding. You can really make a difference. There's lots of chefs that have come from pubs and things like that and come in. The hours can be good. The development. The opportunities are there. We know that it's very, very short-staffed in hospitality at the moment, but the opportunities are there, and you can push on and learn so much and really make a difference. I when I was asked to go to work in care first, I got to say I was a little bit reluctant, and I thought, no, actually, I'm gonna give it a go, and I'm gonna put where I was on the map and start to make a real big difference. And we did. We started to make a huge difference, and it was rewarding for all the chefs. And I think they're fantastic. The residents are amazing. I think we underestimate that when you're looking after residents. These have got stories, and some of the residents we look after, are amazing, absolutely amazing. And you can get out there and get and talk to them and really make a difference for their nutrition and their food. And I think food is so important.
I'd want to emphasise as well, the chefs are a major part of the teams that help our residents to have the best lives possible, but also about that health side of it and keeping them safe. Chefs can help people stay out of hospital. I don't know that they always realise this, how integral they are to it.
Food is a medicine.
Absolutely, food is medicine. Was it Hippocrates? And there's something about making sure that chefs and the catering team feel like they are part of the team, and that they're communicating across the whole home between everybody who works on the floor, management, the kitchen. Everybody should be aware of what the residents' needs are and singing from the same hymn sheet. And it's one of the things we say to people who come on our training is chefs, kitchen colleagues, catering colleagues, you make a massive difference. And I would also say to my colleagues in speech therapy, please, when you go into care homes, ask, can I go to the kitchen and talk to the chefs? Make that connection, talk to each other, support each other, help them understand about IDSI and dysphagia and talking through particular residents' needs, because it makes such a difference.
Yeah, chefs are instrumental, aren't they, in the implementation of particularly what us as dietitians and speech therapists are putting in place, what recommendations we rely on someone to help that be followed through. And yeah, chefs are instrumental in that.
And I think touching on,
I think it's important that chefs do listen, though, to speech and language therapists and dietitians. You know, they're professionals that are giving you some help and support. But I think that care and catering need to talk more in homes. For me, they're very, very similar roles. They're very under pressure. They're very busy. They've got lots of deadlines, and they don't often talk to each other that well. Grunt and bark at each other, I say, normally, and you know, we only get told when there's an issue, and I say, no, come and tell us when we're doing something good as well. Let's work together and get this continual improvement, and it will help the team, and it really does. A one home approach, and wow, you know, when it does work, it's unbelievable.
And going back to your residents and asking their opinion, and with you know, and in formulating your menus. And work what did and didn't work, and letting them know, yeah, we're trying stuff out. We're seeing what's good, and making those residents and their families feeling valued and part of the process.
And going back to what Adam said about people looking to come in as cooks from outside, I think some of the feedback that I've definitely had over the years is that they have more flexibility. I think when you work in a pub or a restaurant, you're told what the menu is, whereas, like you said, Gary, you've got the opportunity to go out and speak to people about what their favourite meals were, what they would like to see on the menu, what they don't want to see on the menu, and really make it, you know, person-centred for that home. And like you said, put that home on the map in the local area.
Definitely. Let's go on to level 5. Let's show you.
Yeah, so level 5, let's have a look.
Okay, I've taken the cloth off again. So I don't know if you've noticed that the plates that I use are colour-coded as per the IDSI framework. So we had the green plate behind me, which was the puree. We've gone on to the minced and moist, which is the level 5. And here it is. This is cooked a little bit different. So we've got the turkey that's chopped to 4 millimeters, which is one of the gaps in the fork. We've got the cream potato, which is lovely and smooth. You could put diced potato the same, chopped to 4 millimeters, put on top, but I think it just looks tidier with the cream potato. We've got the sausage, which is cooked really tender and chopped to 4 millimeters. There's the carrot cooked soft. There's the Brussels sprouts cooked soft, and there's the parsnips. So remember, when we're doing the audit, we put our thumb on the fork this way. It should only turn the nail white. So, for instance, the vegetables are on the plate. They need to change shape. If they don't change shape and they bounce back, not cooked soft enough. So you can see that we're cooking the food 2 ways. With the puree, we cooked it a little bit al dente. This needs to be cooked soft for the level 5 and chopped to specific sizes. So 4 millimeters, 1 gap in the fork, no bigger than. So you need to do a visual check. So all I do is grab my chopping board and a sharp knife, and as if you're chopping parsley, just chop it on the board, do the visual check, and just make sure the sizes are right. And I say that when you think it's ready, just chop it for a couple more minutes just to make sure, and then you can put it back on the plate. And it's entirely up to you. I use a spoon, and I just shape it on the plate like a quenelle, and just put it straight on the plate, which is what we've got there. But you could layer it. So you could use pastry cutters and layer the food. It's entirely up to you how you want to present it. As Sandra said, it is a little bit more difficult because it's chopped really, really small. So to arrange it, yes, it's cooked soft and it will just compact a little bit. Yeah, you need to think about how you're going to present it, basically. So that's the level 5 minced and moist, no bigger than 4 millimeters.
Gary, how have you cooked your meat? Because that tends to be the one I fail the most when it comes to the audits.
Well, I say that with meat, you need to cook meat with respect. So This is turkey, so I said I cooked it. It was like a steam, if you like, and I sealed it off, made sure it's really tender. Mince beef or any mince products needs to be simmered for about 3 hours. It needs to be cooked tender. It's the cheapest cut of meat. Chicken breast, you can pan fry both sides in the oven, and it takes about 18 minutes to cook a chicken breast. So not 45 minutes with a little bit of stock around it. That's going to be tough, like eating my shoe. So you need to cook the meat with respect. And understand that different cuts of meats cook different ways. So it's got to be cooked tender. If it's not cooked tender, as Sandra's just said, when it fails, this is where they then go on to have the minced and moist and maybe have the meat pureed. So you need to get that meat right. It needs to be tender and that good consistency sauce around. So I chop my meat up, put it into a little bowl, and then I get the nice sauce and I add it to the meat and check it, not the other way around, and we check the consistency. So, and that's what just binds it. I did go into some home recently where they just chop meat and just put it on a plate. That would never pass. So this was ham just chopped up really small. It's the right size, but there's no sauce around it. It could have had like a nice cheese sauce or a parsley chopped really fine in like a parsley sauce, ham and parsley sauce. Which would help that person to eat that food, and it would get the perfect consistency. But just chopping the meat, that's not ideal, really.
And too often where people have pureed the meat because unfortunately they haven't got the meat right at a level 5 or will come on to level 6, that's not least restrictive practice. Just pureeing stuff, that's for your convenience. That's not for your resident. And it can de-skill their ability to eat and drink. It may be the speech therapist is trying to get them back up through the levels, back to normal. And if you keep pureeing elements of it, and that's not actually what's in the recommendations, it doesn't optimize well-being, and it might de-skill them, and it isn't the least restrictive practice.
I was going to ask if there was going to be a sort of special technique or a machine that you used to chop, and then you pulled out your knife and your chopping board, and I was like, "Oh, this is graft. This is graft. This is proper cooking." Sorry, Dawn.
No, I was just going to ask because I know. So over this past couple of weeks, I have been aware of a resident who has been deemed to require a minced and moist diet, but their favourite meal is a jam sandwich. Now, we were told by the salt assessor to cut it up really small.
That might be because they had some specific elements of their swallow presentation such that was safe to do. That's outside of a level 5. So that's a special instance that the speech therapist has decided is okay.
Right. Okay.
That isn't something that you could then say, yeah, anybody else on level 5 could have that.
So it's just specifically for that person if it moves
Yes.
if it tends to move outside of that. Because
When
I'm
it comes
sitting
to
thinking,
bread,
are we going to do something with this bread? I know we were told to cut the crust off and cut it very small, ensure there was plenty of jam, but I was sitting there thinking, oh, what am I supposed to do with this bread?
So not knowing the resident or the reason why the speech therapist recommended that, they clearly have a good reason for it, and it should be in their speech therapy recommendations and thus then in your care plan, how that's made and what type of bread, because every loaf of bread is different. So it needs to be as specific as the speech therapist can be. Even the jams would be different. And are you adding
jam's
butter
a
or
bit of a
not?
tricky one, isn't it?
And that sort of thing. And if you are cutting it up small, how small? And I've even used photos sometimes next to a ruler so people can see exactly. Because we do want to optimize well-being. We do want people to enjoy their favorite foods, and it doesn't always fit exactly into nice neat little boxes. We've done the best we can with the IDSI framework, but there'll always be things that fall outside of it. And it's just about us speech therapists being very specific to support you, to support the residents and get the care plans right.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So level 6.
Level 6 is soft and bite-sized. This is probably the second most popular one. It usually goes level 4 puree, then level 6 soft and bite-sized, and then level 5. And Gary has got his measuring. Yeah, do you know what? Every chef in every catering kit should have it. Absolutely. So you know what your 1.5 centimeters looks like, roughly the size of a dice, but do measure. Because really small differences can make a can be the difference between how risky it is for some people. The funny thing about soft and bite size, which replaced the old fork mashable, is it's called soft and bite sized because the person on it probably can't bite. So you have done the biting for them by making it bite size. Hence why you shouldn't really be going too much bigger than that. It needs to be soft enough that when it's in the mouth, you could squish it between the tongue and the palate. But you should also be able to have some chewing of it as well. And it's a nice one sometimes that speech therapists use between the like really soft, maybe puree, and getting to the normal level. Again, following the IDSI audit sheets, doing the essential criteria tests, squishing it down with your fork. Shouldn't take too much pressing, shouldn't be too firm, because you don't want, when the person's chewing, to have to work too hard. It should just squish really easily. So that in just a matter of seconds, by the time they've managed that food bolus in their mouth, they've sort of made it a level 5 in their mouth before they swallow it. Because all of our brains know we're ready to swallow when we're at the kind of level 5 consistency at the back of the tongue. And that's what triggers it. So level 6, soft and bite-sized, 1.5 centimetres squared, no bigger. Again, this is a bit of a challenge sometimes around the meat side of things, but as Gary will show you, it's still absolutely doable.
Right, let's have a look then, Gary. Your level 6 soft and bite-sized Christmas dinner.
So we've got the turkey, which is cooked tender with a gravy, cream potato on the top. We've even got the sausage there that I said it's not crispy, skinned, and it's just cooked. We've got the carrots, we've got Brussels sprouts, and we've got parsnips. And all of them, you should be able to squash it with your fingers and use that fork to change shape in Easter mash down. So the sizes are all no bigger than, so 15 millimeters. So this is where you need the tape measure or a ruler in your kitchen. And I jokingly say that chefs need to get a new belt. So when a speech and language therapist walks in, they can have the measure and the fork on the belt, and they'll walk in and know that the chef's auditing the food and doing it properly. It is that important. We need to make sure that it doesn't get stuck and cause them to choke. So those sizes are very specific. It's precision catering. It really is.
But those sizes can't be smaller, Gary?
Well, I say play with the size. It can be a little bit smaller, but if you start playing with the sizes, when I get my food and I'll put it in front of you here, the 3, you need to be able to look at it and say 4, 5, 6. If you start playing with the sizes, the 5 gets a little bit bigger, the 6 gets a little bit smaller. It can cause confusion. And then if the wrong person gets the wrong food in the wrong room, that could be an issue.
Yeah.
I've got a product idea for you here. All right. So tell me if it won't work. But I like to sew and I like to craft. And I love my craft mat because it's got all my measurements already lined up on it for me. So I know what's an inch, I know what's 1.5 inches, I know what's 2 inches. What if we had colour-coded chopping boards that were level 6 friendly, so that actually they were done in grids so you could see what your 1.5 centimetres was?
There you go. There you go. Love it. Give it a colour-coded and the sizes on it. Brilliant.
Yeah. Dragon's Den. Let's do it.
I noticed a really important comment that's been made about whether the residents can swallow, whether they can eat and drink for themselves, and whether it's down to the speech therapist or the health practitioner. I think it's very much per individual resident as to what's either in their best interest if they don't have mental capacity themselves. And there's lots involved in that, isn't there, when we're down to best interests?
Yeah.
But if somebody does have mental capacity, they can make all sorts of choices about what they do and don't want to do. And the speech therapist should be bearing that in mind. I'll also reiterate, I think it's something that I touched on before about the word feeding. And we're trying to move away from saying feeding because they're not babies and they're not animals, that we're assisting, we're supporting, that we're working together with people to help them be, if not as independent as possible, certainly to retain as much autonomy as possible, but independence is important too. When it comes to dysphagia recommendations, It is down to a speech therapist. It can be overridden by a medic, but only by a medic, and nobody else other than the resident with capacity themselves.
When you say a medic, Sandra, do you mean a doctor?
Yes.
Yes.
But to be fair, I've never had a single doctor override my swallow recommendations. But they can.
Just
They'd
talking
have to have
about
good reason.
Yeah.
Just talking about recommendations. Somebody sent me a message outside of YouTube, just asking. They work in community care, so they've got people that are on. They haven't put what level they're on, but they're asking if there's any companies that you would recommend to the customer that they support.
For pre-prepared meals?
Yeah.
I would have to put my hand up here to having an interest because I work for one of those companies. But I will list the companies I know of. So
Okay.
They're not recommendations, they're the list of companies we know exist.
We're not beyond the shameful plug, Sandra, don't worry.
And it's for people to decide for themselves which ones they prefer. I'd say try each and have a look at the prices. One of them is Oak House Foods, it's Made For You range. The other is Wiltshire Farm Foods. Those are the two main ones who deliver to people's homes. And you also have Appetito. Have I missed any, Caroline?
No, they're the only two. There was one, but they've now disappeared off the market.
And it's a competitive market. They're really up against each other. And it's worth having a look on their websites and giving them a ring. They're all really friendly. They all understand sometimes that people with dysphagia can't always communicate very well either, because often those things can go together. And they do all have consultant speech therapists and dietitians who advise. So it's good to go, and they can be really good as a backup as well. I've worked in a number of neuro rehab units who'll have their own kitchens, but also through COVID, so many chefs and catering colleagues were off sick, and they needed a bit of backup. And that you can rely on those companies because they've got to get it right, that they would pass the IDSI audit tests, but you have to have followed the cooking instructions to the letter because they're not always exactly the same as you would buy from a supermarket. For example, if you do buy them, some of them, you don't take it out of the cardboard and then pick the lid. You keep it as is. And people have got into habits of how you do things, putting the pre-prepared meals into the microwaves and so on. And then they're not cooked right, and then they are unsafe. So you do have to be super careful at reading the instructions. And some are for ovens and some are for microwaves. And making sure your microwave, looking at the right wattage cooking as well, because it makes a big difference for those meals. They're really like fine measures either side. And if you go ever so slightly over on cooking it just by 15 seconds, it can make it unsafe.
I think there's a perception, isn't there, that some of those meals might not be particularly tasty, but actually they've done a really great job of making them taste really nice. And then they also, both companies do a range of mini meals as well, which are smaller portions, which are really great because obviously a lot of people with swallowing problems do get overfaced by larger portions. So that's quite nice. So they are a great solution if you're not able to prepare fresh food, which is a nice offering to be able to offer.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I was about to say, I'm just looking at the time now, and we could sit here and talk about this all night, but Gary, you've got more delicious things to show us. So we've seen level 6.
Okay, so Christmas is coming. This is this is just a glorified trifle. Here it is. So we've got chocolate sponge on the bottom. We've got raspberry jelly, which just covers the sponge, which is a soaking solution. Then I've got fresh raspberries, some sugar, and some smooth cranberry that goes in there. And it goes on the heat. We blend it down. We pass it through a sieve. Why? Look how many pips are in the raspberries. Lots of pips. It has to go through.
Imagine those being aspirated.
I know. It has to go through a really fine sieve, which it did. We let it cool down, still checking the consistency. Then we've got custard with, because it's Christmas,
Advocate.
A little bit in there. It adds that booziness and it just makes it really nice. There's a little bit of cream in there, still checking the consistency. And then we've got double cream on the top. The double cream has got some vanilla. It's got some icing sugar. That's what stops it turning into water when you put it in your mouth. We dissolve it, whip it up, pipe it on the top, and you'll see there is some chocolate on the top. The chocolate is transitional food. When you put it in your mouth, it will melt. There's no chocolate pieces, there's no nuts, there's no bits in it. It's completely smooth. So when you put your spoon in and you taste it, it's completely smooth. This dessert would give to anyone on normal food level 7, level 6, level 5, and level 4, which will save the chef time. So one dessert for everyone, so it's inclusion, no isolation. They're going to get the same pudding or same dessert, what everyone else is going to have. So that is completely smooth. And you can do anything. So you just need some sponge in the freezer, bring it out, make some jelly. If you've got any fruit left over, just puree it. You need to pass it through a sieve, make sure there's no pips in it and seeds. So the list is endless. And you can do chocolate orange. This is chocolate orange, Terry's chocolate orange on the top. So it will all add to the taste. So it's absolutely amazing. And as Caroline said, it's fortified. So there's lots of cream in there, lots of calorific value, and the taste is amazing.
How envious are we all that we've not got one and Gary's got those sat in front of him now?
No.
And the best chocolate, Terry's chocolate orange.
Yeah.
My favourite.
I'm also a little bit envious because I'm convinced Gary's got a bread maker behind him and is pipping that it's ready. I bet your kitchen smells amazing.
I know there was a really good question there about what about people with diabetes, and we do appreciate that people have other needs. Sometimes it's medical diets, sometimes it's religious diets, sometimes it's cultural diets. But everything Gary's shown you tonight, you can do in other ways. In our most recent training, we had 2 vegan chefs, and we could do everything, completely vegan.
You can.
Honestly, I think it's been fantastic tonight. And I'm just thinking, Gary sat there and said that this dessert is for all food level diets and it's for everybody. And you're right, we don't have one sat in front of us. And I'm just thinking I could just eat this chocolate trifle right now. Thank you both, all 3 of you, for joining us tonight. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
No doubt we'll have you back again in the future because, dysphagia food diets are always evolving, always adapting, and it's going to take us hours and hours to cover all the topics and all the conversations and drinks.
About drinks as well, yeah.
Oh, well, maybe next time we'll have a cocktail hour and Gary can show us how to adapt all of our fluids.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Dawn, I'm going to let you mention who's coming on next week's show because I know you're a little bit fangirly right now and I'm borderline with you there. So who have we got next week?
So next week we have Professor David Sheard spending next Tuesday evening with us. He has recently obtained the position of Professor of Emotional Intelligence at York St John's University. And he is coming to discuss with us his new role and how he wishes to take emotional intelligence forward. So that is very, very exciting for us next week.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, again, thank you all so much for joining us. I doubt we'll see you beforehand. So Merry Christmas to you all. We all hope you have an ITSE certified diet wherever you are, and you're following Gary's tips, obviously, to make that fantastic pudding in your Christmas dinners. But until then, good night, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Thank you again for joining us tonight on The Caring View. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and whilst you're here, check out some of the other videos that we've got up online. If you've got something that you think may be interesting for us to discuss, or if you want to guest spot with us, then drop us an email to thecaringview@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter, find us on Facebook. All the information is down there in the description box. But until then, have a good evening, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.